Welcome to the Circuit of Success Podcast.
The Circuit of Success Podcast.
With your host,
Brett Gilliland.
Brett Gilliland, Visionary Wealth Advisory.
The Circuit of Success Podcast. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I am your host, Brett Gilliland, and today I've got, at least on the far left, I don't know what it looks like on the real screen, I've got Willow. How are you doing, Willow?
Doing well. Thanks so much for having us.
Absolutely. And then in the middle here, we've got Jess. How are you doing, Jess?
Doing great. So happy to be here.
Awesome. So we've got Brooklyn, we've got West Palm Beach, and we've got St. Louis, Missouri, all coming together. So excited to be with you all. I met you through Jesse Itzler, doing his coaching program, and it's been awesome so far, and a lot of great people involved in that. And he had you two on to speak, and you guys run Shark Tank and have an amazing story. And so after that call, I went to your Instagram page. I said, hey, we got to get them on the podcast, and now here we are. So excited to be with you both. But the way I start every podcast is a little bit of the backstory on what's made you the women that you are today. So obviously we know where you're at now. You got BarBees, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But what's made you the woman you are today? And Willow, we'll start with you.
Let's see. A lot of moving around, I feel like, has shaped me. I grew up kind of all over and have landed here in Brooklyn. But I think at an early age, I really learned the skill of adaptability. My dad's job kind of brought us all over the country. And I'd say I've spent the most time in my life in Nashville. So it's kind of, I would say, capital H home for me. But I really have just learned to be able to adapt to whatever environment that I'm in. And I think that is really what shaped me as an entrepreneur more than anything, is just knowing no matter what environment, what room, what audience, whoever's in front of you, whatever you walk into, you just adapt and you figure it out. There might be those few seconds of, oh, it's awkward, but got to figure it out. And so I feel really comfortable in that space. And I'm so glad to have a business partner who is equally comfortable adapting, because it really helped us when we were on the big stage of Shark Tank last year.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah. Jess, what about you?
I grew up as the only child of two entrepreneurs. My parents are both business owners.
Doing that because I'm an only child as well. So we're a special breed.
All right.
We are a special breed.
We are a special breed.
Are you good at sharing your French fries?
Am I good at sharing my French fries? I can't say I always wanted siblings, because I feel like I did have a great childhood experience, but I'm always willing to share because I like having that kind of communal experience. Yeah.
My wife, we have coined it in our house, the OCS, the only child syndrome. And I have 4 boys. And so I'm not very good at sharing my French fries or my food. It's like, get out of here.
Oh, my gosh.
I apologize.
And the 4 then have to share everything, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. Sorry, Jess. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, my parents are they've kind of been an example to me of what it's like to create something out of nothing. They are private investigators and started their business after watching a TV show, and they were like, this is cool, let's do this. So just they're examples to me of starting something out of nothing, and that's always been really inspiring to me. And I've been able to watch how their lifestyle, they've benefited from this entrepreneurial lifestyle. They never missed a game, and they've been able to travel and take advantage of some of those things. They've also worked really hard, and I've been able to see that and be inspired by it. And so that's kind of what kicked off this entrepreneurial journey for me.
Love it. And so how did you two meet?
We met at university. So we both went to Belmont University in Nashville.
Belmont.
We spent a year not knowing each other, but at the beginning of our second year there at Belmont, everybody started telling us, do you know Jess? Do you know Willow? Like, how have you two not crossed paths? So I kept hearing about this infamous Jess. And I was like, who's this person I'm missing in my life? And a friend finally set up a dinner, and everybody was right. We were like, how did we not know each other before this? And I do remember very early on, Jess and I saying we will either run for office together or own a business together. So the office dreams are long gone, long dead, but we did start a business together.
I love it. Belmont, great university. My son actually looked at that. He's going to Mizzou in the fall, but that was on the short list. So, well, let's talk about the Shark Tank. Actually, before we do the Shark Tank experience, let's talk about BarBees, B-A-R, and then capital B-E-S, right? BarBees. And so talk about that. What is that for the listener that doesn't know what that is?
Yes, so we are a mobile cocktail class company and virtual cocktail class company. We go into people's intimate space, we go into their homes, we go into their corporate offices, and we teach them how to make drinks, whether that's in person or virtually. And we did not start off that way. We actually started in 2019 as an event bartending service. So we were slinging drinks for large scale private events, for weddings, fundraisers,
Wow.
big just very, very large scale events. And so we started after going to bartending school on a complete whim. Willow called me up one day and said, hey, we're both pretty antsy in school. We want to learn something new. We've always been talking about doing something kind of out of the box. Do you want to go to bartending school? And I was like, all right, sure. We never really had ambitions of being like, career bartenders or anything, but I think both of us just wanted to learn something new, wanted to build a memory together. And so we went to bartending school. That is where we came up with the idea of BarBees. We actually were driving home one night from school and we were just bouncing around the idea of starting this company, starting an event bartending service. And we were just throwing back and forth names, and we looked at each other at the exact same time and said, BarBees, like a bumblebee. And Willow calls it divine conception. We said it kind of out of nowhere, pulled it out of the ether together. And so we were like, that has to be it. That has to be the name. And so BarBees has kind of shifted and adapted and taken on many forms over the years, but that is how we got started.
I love it. It really makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking back to the parties that I've had at my house. So we've had to, kind of rent, if you will, a bartender. And I just happened to call restaurant people that I know. I'm like, hey, can I rent one of your employees for the night? And so it makes a lot of sense. And then you take that idea, you start that, which again, we're going to dive into the business owner side and entrepreneurial side. But so high level now, you do that. And then how long were you in existence before you went on Shark Tank?
It had just hit our 4-year anniversary.
Okay.
I think the day we talked to the casting director was our 4-year anniversary. Now looking back, so it was quite a way to jump to begin our 5th year of business, and then we aired right around our 5th anniversary. So it was kind of a year-long process of just it being in the works and talking about it and prepping for airing. And so we got to celebrate 2 significant birthdays with Shark Tank.
That's amazing. So how does that even happen? Do you reach out to them? Do they hear about your business? They call you? How'd that go down?
So we applied.
We have to... Go ahead, Jess.
We applied, and that's every business that goes on the show has to go through a really extensive application process. It's a lot of months of kind of going back and forth and submitting more information, and first submitting a paper application and then submitting a video, multiple video applications, and then chatting with people. And so it is a pretty extensive process. Everybody kind of goes through a similar process. I think now they offer some live casting calls and stuff in certain cities across the country. We didn't get to be a part of that, but they do that in, I think, LA, New York, and Virginia. They do some open casting calls, but it is really a cool, it's part of our story, really, the whole application process, that it gave us the chance to dive into our business in a way that most people don't have the opportunity to. Like, we really, really dove into the numbers, into like our why, into why we're doing all of this through the application process.
I'm writing this down. What is your why? Because we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And so that process, what is that like? So, okay, they say, yep, you guys, you ladies are in, you're going to be part of the show. Now what?
Well, you're kind of always wondering if you are in, okay. It's all the disclaimers of, hey, nothing is for sure
until it airs,
but be ready if it happens. And so you're kind of prepping for this thing, this major, massive, horrifyingly scary, but exciting thing, also knowing it might not happen. So like having to be ready for that kind of stress, and then also ready for the disappointment of maybe not doing it. And so I believe we found out it was officially happening within 2 weeks of heading out to LA for filming. Wow. And so that's when it was like, okay, we were prepped and ready because we did the work. We set up our own practice pitches with a bunch of cool panels of people who helped pour into us and really put us on the hot seat and asked us all the hard questions. I will say, Jess, maybe you'll agree with this. The questions in our practice pitches were harder than the actual pitch in the tank. So
Well,
we
that's
were
good.
well prepped. We had some great preppers. And so, yeah, it kind of was just because of the time we put into it, we felt ready to go when we did get the official call. And there's a little part of you that's like, oh, this is actually going to happen. Oh, now we actually have to do this. Because it was the scariest thing either of us have ever done.
That's amazing. So those doors open. I mean, I guess even before that, do you go there and do you get to meet the sharks at all, or is it literally the first time you're in front of them is when you're pitching?
Yeah, I think the show does a really accurate job of kind of setting the stage for what really does happen. So you walk in and they don't know anything about you, anything about your business. They're not involved with selecting who goes on the show. There's, producers and that kind of thing for that. But they don't, when you step in, we were told that they just kind of let them know our names just so that they can call us out by name and engage with us in that way right before we walk in, but otherwise they don't know anything about you. So you walk out and you are really pitching your business to them for the first time, and that's why it's so important to rehearse and get that clarity down so that they know exactly what you're doing, because they've never heard of you before.
That's crazy. And is it when we watch it on TV, is it pretty accurate as far as time length, or are you there a lot longer and they cut it down? What is that like?
No, you're there a lot longer. People are like, wow, that was quick. And we're like, it was not quick. And we were in there. It was 30 minutes. Ours was actually faster than some other pitches. But yeah, I mean, I think about 7 minutes of ours actually ended up airing. And, there's some pitches that go much longer and you see, 10-ish minutes of them. Maybe there's a commercial break in between two segments. But you're never going to see the whole picture, which is kind of, it can be difficult, right? Because on our end, we have no control over anything, what's aired, how they present us. And luckily Shark Tank is so good about highlighting people's strengths. They're not out to make people look silly or stupid in any way. I feel like most people you see, you're like, I'm really proud of them. They did a great job. They're not trying to make anyone, they're not trying to catch anybody's worst angle,
Yeah, that's good. They got a product they want to be proud of. So who are the Sharks? Tell the listeners who are the Sharks.
So our panel was Mark Cuban, Damon, Mr. Wonderful, Lori, and Daniel Lubetzky. He was a guest shark on the show. He is the founder of Kind Bar, and he's who we ended up getting a deal with.
Awesome. And did you get a deal with everybody or not? What was the number of people?
We got a deal with one shark. So that's typically how it goes. Sometimes they'll partner together and come up with a deal all together. But we partnered with just Daniel.
Cool. Awesome. And so what has been your biggest takeaway from that experience?
I think the biggest takeaway is being ready to present your business at any moment. We were given, I think, so much time to prep for this, and now we do feel ready, that we could walk into any other setting and say, hey, here's BarBees. Here's what you should love about BarBees. Here's what we love about BarBees. And I think that, like Jess mentioned earlier, going through our business with such a fine-tooth comb and just looking at the things that you kind of hide in the closet that you don't ever want to think about, or you think, oh, no one's going to see that part of my business. I don't really need to deal with that. I don't need to fix that process. Doing all of those things and just being really honest about where we were at helped us get it to a point that we're more proud of our business now, the structure of our business now than ever. And now I think we'd be ready to do something big like Shark Tank again with even less prep this time, since we've done that. So I think that's the confidence of that is the biggest takeaway for me.
Yeah. What about you, Jess?
I think it's in a similar vein. It's just knowing your weaknesses so intimately and being able to deal with them head on, because you have no choice. It's like somebody's going to ask about them on a show like Shark Tank. Somebody's going to expose them, because they want to know before they invest. And it's not like a gotcha thing. It's just they're genuinely going to put their money in a business that they believe in. And you have to be able to answer for the things that you're not super proud of. And every business has those, and that's okay. But being able to own them, say why, say what you're doing to address them, I think that was very empowering throughout this process, because it just, a lot of times you tend not to think about them. It's just, for example, Willow and I, like, marketing metrics and understanding the data behind all of that is not our strength. But diving in and learning how to understand all of that and going through our Google ads and understanding what each number means and why and what the conversion rate is and what the cost per conversion is and all of those things was just so empowering and to just learn it and dive into it. So I think that was the biggest takeaway for me.
Yeah. So talk about that from the invulnerable. You got to be vulnerable. You got to be transparent, don't you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Talk about that investment in, like you said, Google ads and different things like that. Like, I think it's hard it's hard for me, right? As a business owner, and we've got 8 office locations, but how do you convince yourself to spend money on that thing that you don't even know where it goes, right? These funnels and these clickbait and all this stuff, right? It's like, gosh, how do you do a lot of that? And if so, how did you get comfortable with it? And how do you analyze it to see, for our listeners, does it make sense to invest in that? Because again, I've got clients that spend $3,000 or $4,000 a month for this thing that they just put out on Google, and they don't know if it works, but yet they're still going to get some business, right? So how did you get through that?
Google ads are our number one driver of business, and they have been the last 3-ish years since we started using them. And it really changed the business that we were able to grab, specifically as we were expanding to other cities. So, in Nashville, we knew the market. There's so much word of mouth. There's so much camaraderie in the entrepreneur community and the events industry where we founded BarBees. And so that market was easy for us. As we expanded, we didn't know what it was going to look like to market in New York City and Scottsdale, Arizona. And so Google ads really became our number one driver of business there. And it's worked really well for our model, especially because we are very heavily in the bachelorette world. And so bachelorettes are doing a lot of their, research for planning these elaborate bachelorette weekends. And they want to have a cocktail class. So we typically come up in search engines like that when people are looking for specific events and things that they're celebrating. But for us, it has been the most worthwhile investment. We did have to come to terms with the fact that it's not our strength and we probably need to outsource it. And so we do. We have an amazing team that helps us with our Google ads, and we work very closely with them to learn it. We're trying to learn, but I think that's a huge part of business ownership too, right? Yeah. Is knowing the things that, okay, I'm going to tackle this, I'm going to jump into this and spend my time and energy. And wow, I'm really not good at this. We need to pay someone else to do it.
Yeah. Knowing your strengths,
I think when
right?
thinking, well, and I think when thinking about something like Google ads too, this is a little bit in the weeds, but it's worth thinking about. For us, our terms are very searchable. So it's like we do a lot of corporate events and we do a lot of bachelorette parties, like Willow said. And so a lot of people are typing in corporate team building, activity to do with my business, like my team or something like that. The terms are very searchable. And I think for us, it's a really, really good fit. And I think all of that came through, or bachelorette parties too. It's like bachelorette activities, Scottsdale. There's not a whole lot of variation for what you can search for corporate team building events and bachelorette parties. And so for us, it's a really good fit, and kind of coming to that was just talking to people who are smarter than we are about that kind of thing, and just understanding how they work. And so they ended up being a really good fit for us. And, we started off not spending a whole lot of money on them and just kind of A/B testing, if we spend the same amount of money on an Instagram ad versus a Google ad, like what is the difference there? And I think that was kind of the process, which now we spend a lot more money, but it's like starting smaller. You don't have to start with a $3,000, $4,000 a month budget. You can start smaller and see what sticks.
Yeah. But it's scary, isn't it? Because anytime we want to invest money, you can think, well, I'll just do it myself. So where was that turning moment or that aha moment for you two, where you're like, you know what? We have to believe in ourselves. We have to believe in the business model. We have to believe in the growth. I'm willing to spend X, whatever X is, right, to either hire that other person or do that ad or go to another location. What was it for you where you had that defining moment?
The defining moment of bringing someone else on, Brett?
Just investing in yourself, right? I think a lot of successful people listen to this, and I think we all struggle, no matter what level you're at, of hiring that next person or making that big investment, right? So what was there a defining moment for you where you're like, I'm going to do this, and you're like, oh, wow, that worked?
I guess the most recent one, if we're going to be vulnerable, is when Google changed the whole analytic structure, and Jess and I didn't realize. And our Google ads were broken for a couple of months. And we thought, what is going on? And we just were not well versed in the arena to be on top of it. And we thought, okay, we've been white knuckling this, saying we can do it, we'll save money in this area, when we were like, this is our number one driver of business. It's time to invest money into this area. And so that's why we found a really, really great team of Google Ads specialists and SEO people who, like I said, we work very closely with them. And it has been a game changer, because now Jess and I don't spend all these hours trying to figure out, logistics that we really are not well versed in. So the aha moment was when we realized it was holding us back, trying to white knuckle something that we weren't investing in. So,
and that goes for all of our hires, really. It's once we got to the place where we're like, things are slipping, certain things are slipping. We need to hire somebody more detail oriented with us to help us with operations. We need to hire somebody, things are slipping because there are people that are better at certain things than we are. And so as soon as you start to see the volume of business and you start to scale in the way that you'd like, but things start to kind of fall through the cracks, it's like, that's the first sign to be like, all right, it's time to bring somebody on who has a bit more expertise in this area.
Yeah. But again, I keep saying it's tough though, right? It's so tough to write that check. I remember back to my first employee was 2003. I just had a terrible year in business, and I went home. I told my wife, we didn't have any kids yet, I'm going to hire this person to be my assistant. And that person was probably going to make 50 to 75% of what I just made the year before. Right. So it's kind of a head scratcher, but it's like, if you pay attention, anybody listening, right, you pay attention and you watch the people that have gone before you, and you can watch from all different industries. What do they have? They have a team, they have people, and they do what they're uniquely qualified to do. And so I did it, scary as hell. I didn't know how I was going to make payroll, and it just, you just continue and it happens. And so, I applaud you both, because there's a lot of business owners that don't do that and they don't bet on themselves. So again, let's go to that comment of betting on yourself. Have you always been like that, or are you learning as you've gone to continue to bet on yourself?
I think it gets easier over time. I think that's a great question. I think, starting a business in general takes a requisite level of that maybe the average person doesn't have, is saying, we're going to take this chance, we're going to take this leap. But even then, that's, a lot of times that's the easiest part, is like, you're living on the dream, you're excited about your idea, you're really fueled by that. And I think that sometimes that's the easiest part. And it's when things get a little bit harder and you have to continue betting on yourself and you have to continue making those choices that things do, it gets a little bit more complicated. And I think that we've gotten better at that over time, but it's still a struggle.
Right.
Well, and to your point, Brett, just like you said, sometimes betting on yourself means starting to bet on other people as well as you grow that team. Jess and I started just us slinging drinks behind a bar. We weren't really sure what BarBees was going to become. We had dreams of being the number one wedding bartending, service in Nashville, but, we weren't thinking we'd be a national brand or anything. But as we started to dial in what we do, especially through COVID, so we haven't mentioned, through COVID, our entire model shifted. We went from event bartending to virtual cocktail classes, literally just out of desperation. And because people started asking for them. So people started asking for these things that we had would have never thought someone would pay for. And we started realizing that the model of teaching cocktails together in a group was so connective, so fun, and really scratched the itch of why we started a business. And so as we moved out of COVID, we translated those into in-person classes. And that's when it really clicked for us that, hey, this could be bigger than just the two of us. We had a few other people who'd bartended for us, back when we were doing events, but it was the classes that we thought, okay, this we can hand off. We can give this to other people. This model's replicable. And also we can give this to people outside of Nashville. And so that's what started our expansion is betting on other people by betting on ourselves first.
Yep. I love it. How many people do you have working for you now?
About 35.
35 across
35.
the state.
It's awesome. Great for you. What when you get disappointing news, I'm always curious how people deal with this. So like when you get that disappointing news, what do you do? How do you overcome it? And what's that timeline of how long you have your pity party?
I think it really helps having a business partner for that specifically. Is, when we get bad news or we hear something we don't want to hear, we weekly and monthly dive into our numbers and, comb through the data and the statistics of the last week. And, if we ever see something that we're like, oh, it's, a couple weeks now of trending downward in whatever arena, whether it's, marketing metrics or revenue or whatever it is, it does really help to have somebody to share in that,
to grumble with
a little bit. It is, yeah. But then, on the flip side of that, it really does help to kind of hype yourself up that way too. It's just like, all right, well, here's what we're going to do differently. Let's fire each other up. And, often we'll find that one of us is more down than the other picks the other back up, and that flips off pretty regularly. Yeah. But I do think that for us, having a partner really does help. And I think our pity parties are short-lived, just because we know that we're leading a team, and that enthusiasm. So much of our business is like leading groups enthusiastically and bringing the energy and bringing the spirit. And we know that kind of trickles from the top down. So we need to bring the energy and we need to bring the passion. And so we know that our pity parties typically don't last more than a few minutes until we're like, all right, we're making a change and here's what we're going to do.
I love that. And because that's the reason I asked the pity party, kind of jokingly, but seriously, but I call it the bounce back theory. The most successful people, and I've been in wealth management for 23, 24 years. And so I'm dealing with very successful people all day long. Right. And so I've gotten to see from my seat, the bird's eye view of all these different businesses and all this level of success. And now, 391 interviews later of all these successful people from the podcast, it's like the most successful people bounce back quickly from bad news, right? The ones that don't bounce back quickly are the ones that mope about it for a week or 2 weeks or a month, or this pity party for themselves. And I'm glad to hear you say they last a few minutes. I mean, think about that, right? A few minutes. Yeah. That's not very long when you're dealt with bad news.
Yeah.
My dad calls it being buoyant, being a buoyant person, and just being able to, you get underwater sometimes, right? And it's tough, but you got to float back to the top. And so, like Jess said, it does really help to have another person there who sometimes is grabbing you and swimming you to the top. She's sometimes the more buoyant one than me, and vice versa. It does really help to have a partner, and it makes the wins more fun too, right? You're not just jumping around by yourself, getting all excited. You've got somebody to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I got a business partner, Tim Hammett, in Visionary Wealth Advisors, and same thing. We talk about all the time. I could not do this without a business partner. I don't know how people do it, and having that person you can talk to, you can call and be pissed off and cuss about it, or you can call and high five and be like, holy smokes, can you believe that? Like, that just happened, so it's cool to hear. Speaking of that,
no one's going to feel it as deeply as they do.
No. So speaking of, how do you communicate? Yeah. So I think communication, obviously, whether that's in your marriage or any other relationship, but your partnership, how do you communicate and make sure you guys are staying in line with each other and not having these, blow ups, because lack of communication could lead to some fights, right? So how do you two do that and do it successfully?
Well, we're best friends, so we talk. The stream of communication really is all day anyway, and so we talk often. But I do think that there was kind of a defining moment in our business maybe 2 years ago where we started to be like, okay, let's buckle down and structure this a little bit more, where it's like every, we have our set meetings and we'll meet in those times, and, they vary a little bit. It's like, if we're not available one day, we'll switch it to another day, but it's like, we have our set meetings where we dive into not just the metrics of our business, but like, what did we do that could have been gone differently, whether together or, if, you have feedback for the other person, that's a really good time to give it to. But just kind of keeping that line of communication open with your business partner is essential. Because if you're just kind of shooting from the hip, which we did for a couple of years, and it really did work for us. But I do think that you can run into issues that way, and not having kind of like this culture of feedback, both positive and negative. I mean, negative feedback is rarely a bad thing in business. And so we also read a book a couple of years ago that really shaped kind of how we operate together. It's actually called Marriage Without the Sex. It's a really great business book for business partners. And the whole point of the book was that you need to have an ironclad operating agreement, ironclad like communication standards that, with if and when things do get tricky, you can fall back on. And so that was kind of a defining moment for us as well.
That's great. That's great. So when you said it earlier, I think Jess, you said it is, knowing your why. Like when you see my why is right here. This F greater than P is we as a firm and myself. I'm very passionate about helping people achieve a future. I better get to the F there. A future greater than your past. Right. That's what I'm about. Every day I wake up, whether it's my wife, my kids, our team here, our advisors, our clients, helping you achieve a future greater than your past. So that's my why. And when you hear that, what is your why? How do you find it? And how do you share that so you can get buy-in from everybody else?
I think as our business, our why has always been creating connection and creating community. So they're very much two things that Jess and I live by personally as well. And so when we started a business, we thought if we can help people celebrate, connect, converse together in a new fun way, that's gonna be a personal win for us. And so, we thought that being in the events industry and event bartending would do that for us. And we found that Sling and Drinks really did not scratch that itch. We found ourselves kind of being disappointed in the business we had started. We went, oh, this is not creating the connection. It's not hitting the why. It just wasn't. We're making drinks for people. And so then when we started teaching cocktail classes, that's when the why light bulb went off. And it was like, oh my gosh, we're back on it. This is why we're doing this. And this is why we want to make this thing bigger, because we are watching the videos and pictures of the people who take our classes. We have a shared album, a folder that all of our team members, after they teach a class, they put all their pictures and videos in there that we get to see. And and it truly is one of our favorite things to do is like look through pictures, and Jess and I will text each other pictures and be like, oh, this class was so cute. Their setup looked so great. And to see people connect over every single celebration that you can think of, it's so heartwarming. It truly is. And sometimes I have to take a step back and go, it is so cool that we get to be a part of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people's most special days of the year, right? And just, we're teaching a cocktail class. We're a small part of it. We get to be there with those people in their intimate spaces with their best friends, having a seat at the table. One of our team members having a seat at the table representing BarBees really hits the why for us professionally and personally, because what is life without connection and relationships?
It is not much in my experience. And so I wrote on here creating experiences. Like I am in fact, my word of the year is experiences for 2024. And so cool. I love creating experiences with my wife, my kids, my friends, our firm. That's important to me. And so how do we, as again, the listeners, myself, how do we create experiences that we can, remember for a lifetime? And I'll tell you, and before you go on there, I did not like bourbon almost 3 years ago. I hated it. I'm like, this all is terrible. It burns. It's just like, give me a beer, right? And my friend's 50th birthday party, Steve, his wife, Amy, had a guy come in named Pops here locally, and he taught this bourbon class to what you're talking about. And that dude's passion for bourbon opened my eyes to where, like, this is pretty cool. Well, then I've got like the chase mentality of like, now if I can go in and find a bottle of bourbon, that you can't find, I buy it. It's become a joke. It's like, it's a problem, right? Because I'm buying all this bourbon. But that was an experience that was created, right? So how do we as people, for our clients and for our friends, how do we go about creating experiences, not just around cocktails, but do you have a thought about that?
I think that so often we always talk about how the best conversations are started around building memories and activities. I think activities are the best kind of conduit for building memories and experiences with other people. And so I think tying those, because it's like, you can always do an adventure and you can always do an experience or, alone. And I think that that's really valuable too, but it's like, it's those memories that you will share for a lifetime with other people that I think, tying that to an experience and tying that to something, whether it's a cocktail class or going on a trip or taking a cooking class or a bourbon tasting and learning about that. is where people really, I mean, it's just like Willow said, it is really fun for us to be able to know that we've had groups from, 4 years ago reach out and be like, we still talk about the cocktail class all the time. It's like a lot of, for us, it's like, especially our bachelorette groups, it's our cocktail classes are usually on the front end of the weekend. It's a bunch of girls getting together who may or may not know each other. It's the sister-in-law and the cousin and, the coworker and the friend from college. And it's women from all walks of the bride's life. And so for us to come in and build an experience for them really helps build that memory. It helps solidify that memory. It gives them something to talk about forever. And so I think tying an experience to other people, and that's where you really, really get that lifelong memory.
Yeah, I agree. So talk about the daily Go ahead. I'm sorry, Will. Looked like you were going to say something.
Oh, I was just going to say, on the corporate side of things, I even went to a networking event last night, which I don't do often. I think they're kind of awkward, but that's the point, is they're awkward. And I walk into this thing, right? It's just a cocktail bar on a rooftop. And I thought, okay, free cocktails and a New York view. Sure. And I immediately, as a non-awkward person, was like, oh, I wish there was an activity. I wish there was something bringing us together rather than just doing the whose conversation do I interrupt to say, oh, hi, I'm Willow. Can I stand here with you also? I'm not just, here alone. And I literally was like, a cocktail class would have been so much better than this.
Yeah.
It does, because activities really just give people something to focus on. And even whether you're a people person or not, it's just a conduit for connection, we think. And so we found that our classes really, really do that for people in both settings, corporate and, bachelorettes.
Well, it just brings you together, right? There's that, to your point. I mean, even some board meetings I go to where you're like, I got to stand in the corner and like who do I interrupt and go talk? And it's just awkward. And I'm a pretty outgoing person and I'm like, this just sucks. I don't like it.
I question all my natural skills in that setting. I'm like,
for sure. Like maybe I'm just really weird.
I thought I was good at this.
Yeah. If I followed you two around with a camera, and which that would be weird as well, but if I followed you around with a camera and I would say these are the no miss items that Willow and Jess do day in and day out, even for themselves, like personally, because I think the personal side, you got to be strong to be a strong leader, right? Whether that's exercise, meditation, communication, whatever it is. What are those things that we're going to see day in and day out for each of you? Willow, we'll start with you.
My first thought, Brett, was I get myself a little treat, but I don't think that's a great answer. But I do. I love a little treat during the day, and I was literally thinking, what do I get every day?
Oh, yeah, dude,
Sometimes
that's a piece
it's a
of
homemade
chocolate.
treat. I'm not just buying treats every day.
Yeah.
A little piece of chocolate. That's right. I do try. Exercise is a big part of my life, and in fact, Jess was a huge, huge driver of that becoming such a big part of my life. Before Jess, you couldn't catch me in a gym. You couldn't catch me running or doing anything. I was very anti-exercise just because, it hurt and I didn't like that. And right. Jess very lovingly pushed me to stretch myself. She got me to sign up for a spin class, and I fell in love with spin like 3 years ago, which was crazy. I was going to spin class like 4 or 5 days a week. And then she got me to F45. We started doing some weight training. And now I actually can go walk into the gym myself, figure it out, do it. It's still not my absolute favorite thing in the world, but it has become a huge part of my schedule. And so thank you, Jess, for introducing that, because with my treats, my daily treat lifestyle, I need the gym as well. But right. I think professionally, I feel like it's the communication piece, and I can't boil that down to one specific conversation I'm having every day, but it's making sure there is regular communication with Jess, with our team members, we have a director of operations that we work very closely with, making sure that we are active in her world, and I guess just being mindful of what communication looks like through the day, not letting that be oh, I need to check in, I haven't talked to this person all week, and so that's communication, and just keeping up that connection is a huge part of my daily regimen, if you will.
Love it. Jess, what about you?
I think as an entrepreneur, time management can be really interesting because it's like that's kind of the whole point of
Yeah.
being a business owner is that so you have a little bit of flexibility in your day to day. I think a lot of us could go get, a 9 to 5 and it could pay well and it could pay similarly to what we make as entrepreneurs. But it's like being, the whole point of it is so that you have flexibility and autonomy over your schedule, at least for me. That's my why personally. But with that, I think it can be so nebulous. Your tasks don't usually have to be done on a certain day. You don't necessarily have deadlines. And so what I've found really helpful in the last year is just like being very regimented with I'm going to spend this amount of time doing this. I'm going to set reminders so that I kind of impose deadlines for myself, and obviously I'm not beating myself up over it because really there aren't strict deadlines, but it's like creating kind of an urgency spirit within myself has helped me a lot manage my time. And so that's kind of part of my morning routine. That's what you would catch me doing first thing is looking at my to-do list and organizing my day. And then, personally, I really love to spend time outside. Like this morning, I went and ran the beach, one of the benefits of living in West Palm Beach, Florida. But yeah, exercise, spending time outside and exercising is a big part of my life.
Awesome. Love it. Favorite drink to make?
To make or to drink? Those are two
Okay,
different.
this is
let's do that. We'll do that.
Yeah, this is. I was going to say this is a trick question.
Because
all right, well, we'll be vulnerable. We'll be vulnerable and say making drinks isn't actually our favorite activity because it's our job.
It's your job. Right?
So if we can get somebody else to make us a drink, we love that. So I say my favorite cocktails are one that somebody else made for me.
I love that. That's a good answer. That's a very good. That's like me going home and my hobby being looking at investment reports, right? That would be that's what I do at work. I don't want to go home and do that.
Yeah,
literally.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I talk about cocktails all day.
My answer was going to be an Aperol Spritz.
Jess, what's your favorite right now?
My answer was going to be an Aperol Spritz, both because I love the taste, and when I get one out, I'm like, oh, this is perfect. But then if I make it myself, it doesn't really feel like making a cocktail because it's just 3 ingredients. Sure. You can kind of just. I mean, there are measurements that you should follow, but it's also not it's not the most. It's a very generous cocktail. You can just throw stuff together and it ends up being great. So that's probably
what is it
mine.
again?
An Aperol Spritz.
Okay, so how do you make that? What's in that?
So all it is Aperol, which is an aperitif. It's a popular red Italian aperitif, and it's really delicious. It's really bitter. It's not people who love a sweet cocktail. This isn't really for them. It's more of I feel like a bitter spirit forward cocktail. So it's that with sparkling wine, and you just top it with a little bit of club soda. Traditionally, you garnish it with an orange, but if I'm making it for myself, I'll be honest, I'm not. I'm keeping things simple.
Skip the orange.
But that's yeah. What is your favorite, Brett?
Well, now that I'm this bourbon connoisseur, I would say I'm an old-fashioned snob. My wife even knows that. I'm a big snob when it comes to old fashions, and you got to use the right cherry. I go to a place and I see they use the normal, the bright red cherry, and I'm just like, oh, and then I don't want them to muddle that, when they have the bright red cherry. So I old-fashioned, a good old-fashioned with a big block of ice, and the block of ice, if it's clear ice, hitting a home run. That's what will be served right over here at Beyond, is a big clear block of ice with real cherries, like the normal, old-fashioned cherry. And then if you put a little smoke on it, that's even better.
All right.
Yeah. Well, if you're an old-fashioned snob, we have a strawberry old-fashioned that you would hate. Because it is very, very fun, and it is geared towards bachelorettes who don't. A lot of the times they're a little hesitant to jump into a bourbon cocktail, and so we've bacheloretted it, if you will. And so I gave this whole spiel at a class I taught in New York, a corporate thing the other day, where I was dealing with a lot of old-fashioned snobs, and I said, y'all, make this how you want to make it, okay? I'm teaching the strawberry version, but if you've got the way you like to make it, you do your thing, okay?
I'll have to get that recipe and give it a shot. Sounds like a good pool old-fashioned.
Yeah. Yeah,
It is.
it's a good summertime. It's a crowd pleaser.
It is.
It is a good cocktail. Yeah.
I'm in. I actually invented a cocktail.
No, it is good. It's just if you're a snob.
I am going to take
What
claim for
cocktail?
this. It is called. When I say invented it, this is not inventing anything. I do around the pool. We'll have a vodka, lemonade, and just a little splash of grape. And my buddies and I, and even our wives, will drink it at the pool. And then we were in Tahoe playing golf one time, and they had vodka, lemonade, and grape juice on the golf cart. And we ordered them, and my buddy said, "What is this?" And I said, "It's an Edgewood." He's like, "Edgewood?" And I'm like, "It's the golf course we were playing in Tahoe. It was called Edgewood." So I said, "It's an Edgewood." And it just kind of like stuck. And so now my country club, it's the drink of the month. It's on the menu. And there's 2 other country clubs in St. Louis that you can walk into and say, "Give me an Edgewood," and they know what the hell it is. So I'm like, I made a drink. I'm excited.
Sounds like you need to join the
Right, that's
BarBees
funny.
team.
I will.
You might
I'll
need to lead the St. Louis expansion.
Yeah, you're hired.
There you go. Well, hey, we'll have the St. Louis expansion right here out of Beyond. That's what we'll Beyond and
All
BarBees.
right.
Beyond BarBees and Beyond.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, ladies, this has been an absolute great time, and I appreciate all of your wisdom. Where can we find more of you, and where do we send our listeners to, one, get a virtual party? So if you own a business or you want to do something unique for your friends and family, you can contact them and do an awesome virtual class. And so tell us, where can we find that and the in-person stuff?
Yeah, so our site is BarBees, BarBees.com, and you can book any of our classes on there. But our Instagram is barbees.bartending, and our link in bio has links to all of that as well. You can book a class through our Instagram as well, and we also use our Instagram as a place to share new recipes, share some behind the scenes content with Willow and I, share some Shark Tank content. So it's a great place to follow along.
I love it. And do a little plug. So if I'm that business owner that wants this virtual class for my people all over the country, like what is that like? So how does that experience work?
So you're going to choose 2 cocktails that you want to learn. We encourage you to choose 2 pretty different cocktails so you can get a wide range of education. We're going to send you a shopping list that you'll share with all of your participants, no matter where they are around the world. We're going to send you the Google link or the Zoom link, however you want to meet. And one of our instructors is going to hop on and facilitate a class as if they are sitting there in front of you as much as possible. We try to create that connection as much as we can, despite being across the screen. And they start conversations, they ask questions, they call on people, and keep it really, really interactive.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, we'll put all that in the show notes, and we'll put that on social media as well. But it's been awesome having you both, and thanks so much for your time and your wisdom today.
Thank you so much for having us, Brett.
Thank you, Brett. This was wonderful.